You know, for the longest time, whenever I thought about the human brain, specifically the front part, right behind the forehead, I always had this very specific image in my head.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I pictured a CEO, you know the type, a little guy in a crisp suit, sitting in a corner office, barking out orders, making the executive decisions, keeping the rest of the chaotic brain in line.
The prefrontal cortex's boss metaphor.
Exactly. It's comforting, isn't it? It implies there's someone actually in charge up there.
It is a deeply comforting metaphor, and honestly, it is one that has dominated psychology and neuroscience for decades.
Right. The central executive.
The central executive, the homunculus, the little man inside the machine. But if we are being honest with the data, especially the data coming out in the last 2 or 3 years, it is almost certainly wrong.
Wrong or just?
Incomplete.
Or at the very least, it is drastically oversimplified to the point of being misleading. And that is exactly why we are here today. For this deep dive, we are going to dismantle that CEO metaphor. We aren't looking for a boss today. We're looking for, well, what are we looking for? If it's not a boss, what is it? A committee. A riot.
I think of it less like a dictatorship and more like a coalition. A shifting, complex, sometimes contradictory alliance of networks that somehow results in, well, us.
So our mission today is to map that coalition.
We are mapping the architecture of the human mind's control center. And we aren't just naming parts today. We are exploring how they talk to each other, how they evolve, and perhaps most critically, what happens when those conversations break down.
And to do that, we have pulled a massive stack of intel. We are talking high-level neuroscience papers ranging from foundational work back in, 2006, all the way to cutting-edge updates from 2024, and even looking ahead to 2025.
It's a pretty comprehensive list. We have tract tracing anatomy, which is the hardwiring. We have functional MRI connectomics, how things fire together. And we'll even get into some really granular neurochemistry.
So we're looking at the physical wiring, how the networks synchronize, and then the hot side of the PFC, the social and emotional stuff.
Exactly. We'll be drawing on work from researchers like Ben Shalom, Badre, Dosenbach, Seeley, and Rolls. It's a murderer's row of cognitive neuroscience.
Let's start with the physical territory. If I could unzip my forehead right now and look directly at the prefrontal cortex, or PFC, what am I actually looking at? Because for a long time, I just thought it was one big blob of thinking stuff.
The thinking blob.
Yeah, just gray matter that does, math and logic.
It is definitely not a blob. It is highly organized real estate. And to understand that organization, we need to look at a paper that really updates our map. This is from Ben Shalom, published in The Neuroscientist, titled 4 Streams Within the Prefrontal Cortex.
4 streams. Okay, I like the sound of that. It makes the brain feel a bit like a fiber optic network or a river system. What does he mean by streams?
Ben Shalom argues that the PFC isn't a monolith. It processes information in 4 distinct streams based on structural connectivity. These are physical pathways. Imagine distinct bundles of cables running from deep inside the brain up to the surface of the forehead.
And each cable carries a very specific type of data.
Exactly. Each one is specialized.
Okay, let's walk through them. Because if I'm visualizing this, I want to know what these cables are carrying. What's the first stream?
First, you have the motor stream. This is centered in a place we call Brodmann Area 8. Its primary job is connecting to Brodmann Area 6, which is the premotor cortex.
Okay, hold on. Brodmann Area 8 to Area 6. That sounds like coordinates on a map.
That is exactly what they are. Corbinian Brodmann, over a century ago, painstakingly mapped the brain based on cell structure, on the cytoarchitecture. He noticed different regions had different types of cells, and he numbered them. It's a map we still use today.
And it's still relevant. So what are Areas 8 and 6 doing?
So Area 8 is largely involved in the planning of eye movements and gaze. Area 6 is the premotor cortex. It plans the movement of the body, so this stream is the action stream. It connects the decision to move with the plan to move.
So this is the how do I physically execute this stream?
Yeah.
If I see a coffee cup over there and I decide I want it, this is the stream that starts calculating the reach, the grasp.
Precisely. It is the bridge between the abstract desire, I want coffee, and the concrete muscle contractions needed to get it. But that's just the mechanical side. The second stream is where it gets really, really interesting. This is the emotion stream.
The emotion stream. Okay, where does this one live?
This is located in Brodmann Area 9. Now, the wiring here is fascinating. Ben Shalom points out that this area has deep structural connectivity with the insula.
Insula, I've heard of that. That's the part of the brain that reads internal bodily states, right? Like Am I hungry? Does my stomach hurt?
Yeah.
Is my heart racing?
Exactly. The insula is the interoceptive cortex. It monitors the physiological state of the entire body. It tells you if you are cold, if you are in pain, if you are sexually aroused, if you have to use the bathroom. It's the brain's internal dashboard.
So Brodmann Area 9, which is part of my executive brain,
Yeah.
is hardwired to that dashboard.
Hardwired. There's a direct connection.
Wait, let's pause on that. That's actually huge. Because we usually think of the executive brain as being cold and rational, detached. But you're saying there is a dedicated cable piping in how my stomach feels directly into the decision-making center.
That is exactly what the anatomy shows. It means you literally cannot separate thinking from feeling.
Yeah.
Your executive decisions, who to hire, what house to buy, what to say next, are structurally limited by how well your insula reads your stomach.
So if that connection is fuzzy, or if I'm bad at noticing my internal states,
Then your logic fails. Your decision-making is impoverished because it's missing a critical data stream.
that gives a whole new meaning to trust your gut. It's not a metaphor, it's a fiber tract.
It is literally a fiber tract. Okay, so that's stream 2.
What is stream 3?
The memory stream. This is Brodmann Area 10, the frontopolar cortex, right at the very front of the brain, just above your eyebrows.
The most human part, right? The part that's biggest in us compared to other primates.
It is, yes. And Ben Shalom highlights its documented connectivity with the hippocampus.
The hippocampus being the memory storage center, the librarian of the brain.
Right. But specifically, episodic memory, your personal history. This stream is essential for integrating the past and the future. It's what allows you to engage in mental time travel.
Mental time travel, I like that.
You aren't just reacting to the now. You are pulling up a file from 5 years ago to predict what might happen 5 minutes from now. It's the stream that lets you plan, set long-term goals, and simulate future outcomes.
So if the motor stream is act and the emotion stream is feel, the memory stream is remember and predict.
Correct. And finally, the fourth stream, the emotional sensory stream. This is Brodmann Area 11. It connects to the temporal pole and, crucially, the amygdala.
The amygdala, the fear center, the fight or flight button.
Well, the amygdala is more than just fear. It's about emotional relevance, salience. But yes, this stream interprets the emotional weight of sensory input.
So not just what is that object, but how should I feel about that object?
Exactly. Is that face angry? Is that sound frightening? Is that smell delicious?
Yeah.
It provides the immediate emotional valuation of the world outside you.
So we have motor, emotion, internal, memory, and emotional sensory, external. And these aren't just functional concepts. Ben Shalom points out actual physical tracks. We aren't just guessing they connect.
No, this is confirmed by hard anatomy. Ben Shalom references a very recent study by Standalakis and colleagues. They used high-definition tractography.
Tractography, that sounds intense.
It's basically using an MRI to track the movement of water molecules along the white matter fibers in your brain. Water moves more easily along the length of an axon than across it, so you can literally trace the highways.
You can see the cables.
You can see the cables, and they identified specific bundles. For instance, the superior longitudinal fasciculus.
Okay.
Think of that as a massive highway running front to back, connecting the parietal lobe, which processes sensory information, to the frontal lobe. They also mapped the uncinate fasciculus.
The uncinate fasciculus. That sounds like a spell from Harry Potter.
It does, doesn't it? It's a hook-shaped bundle of fibers, hence uncinate, which means hook. It connects the anterior temporal lobe and the amygdala directly to the orbitofrontal cortex.
So that's the amygdala's direct line to the PFC.
It is the physical bridge between your animalistic emotional drive and your higher-order decision-making. Think of the uncinate fasciculus as a dedicated fiber optic hook.
A hook from the emotional brain right into the rational brain.
It's the don't say that mean thing wire. It's the wire that lets you feel anger but choose not to act on it.
I love that. The don't say that mean thing wire. Okay, so I want to put this all together. Let's say I'm walking in the woods and I see a shape that looks like a snake. Walk me through how these four streams fire.
Excellent example. Okay, millisecond one. Your eyes see the shape. The emotional sensory stream, stream 4, lights up. Brodmann Area 11 talks to the amygdala.
Threat detected.
Danger. Possible threat. Your amygdala goes on high alert.
Heart rate spikes. Adrenaline starts pumping.
Right. Now the emotion stream, stream 2, kicks in. The insula registers that heart rate spike and the knot in your stomach. It sends that data to Brodmann Area 9.
The internal dashboard is flashing red.
The message is, body is in alert mode. Okay, so now I'm scared and my body knows it.
Okay, so I'm scared and my body knows it. What happens next?
Simultaneously, the memory stream, stream 3, accesses the hippocampus. It pulls up a file. Maybe that file is snakes in this region are usually harmless garter snakes.
Or maybe it's, I saw a documentary about venomous snakes last week.
Exactly. It adds context. It pulls from your personal history to inform the present moment. And finally,
The action.
the motor stream, stream 1. Brodmann Area 8 preps the muscles in your legs to jump back or maybe to freeze. All 4 of these streams are firing in parallel, integrating internal state, external threat, memory context, and motor planning to produce a single moment of conscious experience and a single unified action.
It's incredible when you break it down like that. It's a symphony, not a soloist. But that gives us a sort of horizontal map, different lanes for different types of information. But there is another dimension to this, isn't there? A vertical hierarchy.
Yes, this is one of the most robust findings in cognitive neuroscience. We need to talk about the rostral-caudal hierarchy. This comes largely from the work of David Baudry and Mark Desposito. We're looking at their foundational 2007 paper, but also Baudry's 2025 review on cognitive control.
I remember reading about this. It implies that the frontal lobe isn't all equal, that there's a slope or a ladder.
That is the key concept. It's called the abstraction gradient. Imagine moving from the back of the frontal lobe, near your hairline, towards the very front, your forehead. At the back, the caudal end, you are dealing with concrete, immediate things.
Like pressing a button?
Motor responses, pressing a button. As you move forward, rostral, the information becomes increasingly abstract. You are dealing with rules, then contexts for those rules, and finally, long-term goals that dictate which context to use.
Baudry uses a great example to illustrate this, involving a task with colored words. It's like a nested set of Russian dolls. Let's unpack that so the listener can visualize it. Let's play the game. Listener, imagine you were looking at a screen.
Okay, let's start at the bottom of the hierarchy, the back of the frontal lobe, the most caudal part. The rule is simple. If you see a red word, press the left button. If you see a green word, press the right button.
Simple input-output. I see red, I press left. I don't need much brain power for that.
Correct. That's a sensory-motor association. Very concrete. But now, let's move one step up the ladder, a little more rostral. Let's add a context. Now, there are 2 frames on the screen, a square frame and a circle frame.
Okay.
The rule changes. If the frame is a square, then red means left. But if the frame is a circle, red means right.
Whoa, okay, so now red doesn't mean anything on its own. I had to check the frame first. The meaning of red is conditional.
Exactly. You need a context controller. A part of the brain slightly further forward has to hold the rule. Square, schema A. Circle, schema B. It tells the back of the brain, the motor part, how to interpret the color red.
So the context part of the brain bosses around the color part of the brain.
Yes. It controls the controller. It's a higher level of abstraction. But we can go one level higher to the most rostral PFC.
What's the next level?
Imagine a voice comes over the loudspeaker and says, for the next 2 minutes, ignore the colors entirely. Sort by texture.
Oh man, so now I have to dump the whole red-green frame rulebook and load a new one. I have to override the context controller.
That is a second-order policy. It's an instruction about how to interpret the context that interprets the feature. And that happens at the very front, in the mid-dorsolateral prefrontal cortex and moving into the frontopolar regions.
It's a hierarchy of control.
The Baudry and Desposito model shows that the PFC is organized like a cascade. Higher, more rostral levels set the constraints for the levels below them.
It's like a chain of command. The general at the front says we are attacking at dawn. The colonel in the middle says that means we need to prep the tanks. And the soldier at the back says, okay, I need to load this specific shell.
It is a valid analogy, provided we remember that the general here is just a brain region processing abstract information, not a homunculus making free will choices.
Right, it's a mechanism.
It's a mechanism of nested control. And what's fascinating is that you can see this physically in patients with brain damage. If you damage the back part, the caudal part, you can't press the button.
Simple motor control's gone.
But if you damage the front part, the rostral part, you can press the button fine. But you can't figure out when to press it if the rules keep changing. You get stuck on the old rule. It's called perseveration.
That explains so much about why some people, maybe even me on a bad day, can do the simple stuff but fall apart when the instructions get complicated. It's a failure of the rostral hierarchy.
Precisely. The abstract control is the first thing to go when we are tired or stressed. Your brain defaults to the more concrete, less effortful processing at the back.
Okay, so we have the 4 streams, the types of info, and the hierarchy. The level of complexity. Now I want to zoom out. We're just talking about regions. We're talking about networks, systems. Because a brain region doesn't do anything by itself, right? It needs to talk to people.
This is where we move from anatomy to connectomics. And for this, we need to discuss a major review by Suzanne Haber and colleagues, Prefrontal Connectomics, from anatomy to human imaging.
I found this paper interesting because it highlights a big problem in the field, the clash between hardwiring and functional blobs.
That is the eternal struggle, isn't it? In animal studies with non-human primates, we can physically trace axons. We can inject a dye and see exactly where that neuron sends its wires. That's the hardwiring.
Like a ground truth.
But we can't do that in humans. In humans, we use fMRI, where we see blood flow changes. We see which blobs of brain tissue light up at the same time. Those are the functional correlations. Haber's work tries to bridge that gap.
And she talks about the PFC in terms of hubs. I love the airport analogy here. Can we break that down?
It is very useful. Haber distinguishes between provincial hubs and connector hubs.
Okay.
Think of a provincial hub like a local bus station, or maybe a small regional airport like Burbank or Midway. It talks mostly to its own neighbors. It integrates information within a specific module, say the visual cortex. All the little visual neurons talk to the visual hub.
It handles local traffic, keeps everything running smoothly within one city.
Right. But then you have the connector hub. That is JFK Airport. Or Heathrow or O'Hare. It connects different modules to one another. It's an intermodular hub.
So it's not just handling traffic within the city, it's the gateway for international flights.
Exactly. It allows the flight from vision to land in the city of emotion. And the prefrontal cortex is absolutely packed with connector hubs. It's the grand central station that allows the vision center to talk to the emotion center, which talks to the memory center, which talks to the motor center.
So if the PFC is damaged, it's like shutting down JFK.
Yeah.
The local flights in, say, San Diego still run. You can still see, you can still move, but you can't get from New York to London.
You can't connect seeing to planning. The integration fails. And this connectivity leads us to one of my favorite concepts in this stack, which helps explain how we actually control ourselves. The dual networks of control. This is from Dozenbach and colleagues.
This was a paradigm shift, wasn't it? Before this, people thought control was just one thing, one network.
Yes. The assumption was that there was one control network. Dozenbach and colleagues, using some really clever fMRI analyses, showed that there are actually two distinct control networks that work in tandem but do very different things.
The startup manager and the steady hand. That's how I think of them.
I like that. The first is the frontoparietal network, or FPN. This system is the adaptive controller. Dozenbach showed it operates on a rapid time scale. It's what fires when you start a task, stop a task, or when the rules suddenly change.
The crisis manager.
The crisis manager. It handles error correction. It's flexible, fast, and shifts moment to moment.
So let's use a driving analogy. I'm driving down the highway. Everything is chill. I'm just cruising. Suddenly, a deer jumps out.
That is the FPN. It screams brake. It interrupts the ongoing state of cruising. It calculates the swerve. It manages the crisis. It's highly metabolic, very expensive for the brain, and incredibly quick.
But I can't drive like that for 4 hours. I can't be in crisis mode for my whole commute. I'd be exhausted.
Exactly. You can't live your life in emergency mode. You also need to stay on task over time. That is the job of the second network, the cingulo-opercular network, or CONN.
And this is the steady hand.
Correct. The CONN is involved in set maintenance. It keeps you in the mode of driving for the entire hour-long commute. It ensures you don't forget that you are driving and start daydreaming so hard you drift off the road. It maintains the task set across the entire epoch.
So the FPN handles the switch and the CONN handles the stay.
Ideally, yes. The FPN initiates the task set and then it hands it off to the more stable, less metabolically expensive CONN to maintain it.
But think about what happens when this handoff fails. If you have a weak CONN,
you can start a task fine, but you drift off after 5 minutes, you lose the thread. That looks a lot like some presentations of ADHD.
Or if you have an overactive FPN, you're constantly switching, you're jumping at every shadow, unable to settle into a rhythm. You can't stay on task because you're constantly detecting errors or novelty that isn't really there.
Precisely. The brain has to balance efficiency, the CONN, with flexibility, the FPN. Dozenbach discusses the small world architecture of the brain. You want high clustering for local efficiency, but short path lengths for global reach.
Like a city's transit system.
Exactly. You have local bus lines for regular processing within a neighborhood, and you have express trains like the FPN to jump across the entire system when things get complicated.
Now in 2021, Vinod Menon and Mark Disposito updated this view. They expanded the roster. It's not just 2 networks anymore.
No, the map has gotten richer. Their paper details the 6-network view. But for our purposes today, there are really the big 3 that everyone needs to know.
Let's name them.
You have the FPN, the executive network, which we just discussed, anchored in the dorsolateral PFC. Then you have the default mode network, or DMN, anchored in the medial PFC. And sitting right between them, both anatomically and functionally, is the salience network, or SN.
The salience network is anchored in the anterior insula and the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, the DACC.
Right. And Menon and Disposito talk about connectional fingerprints. That sounds like forensic science.
It is, in a way. They argue that you can identify a brain region not just by where it is, but by who it talks to. Its pattern of connectivity is its unique identity. And the FPN, in particular, acts as a flexible hub, meaning its fingerprint changes.
It's connectional fingerprint changes. When you're doing a math problem, the FPN wires up with the math regions in the parietal cortex. When you're doing a verbal task, it shifts and wires up with language regions like Broca's area.
It's the universal adapter of the brain. It plugs into whatever tool it needs for the job at hand.
Exactly. This dynamic reconfiguration is the essence of human intelligence. We aren't hardwired for just one thing. We have a control network that can borrow other networks as needed. It's like a general contractor who hires a plumber one day and an electrician the next.
Okay, so we have the anatomy and we have the networks. But here is the question that always bugs me. We have all this machinery, we have the FPN to switch tasks, the con to maintain them, but how does the brain decide what to do?
The why.
Yeah, the why. I mean, I have a billion options right now. I could keep talking, I could take a nap, I could run out of the room. What determines the choice?
This brings us to the why of activation. And the answer largely lies in that 3rd network we mentioned, the salience network. For this, we have to look at William Seeley's work, specifically his 2019 paper on the salience network and homeostatic demands.
Salience just means importance, right? Standing out.
In this context, yes, but it's deeper than just shiny things. Seeley argues that the salience network is an integrator. It takes that input from the body via the insula, am I hungry, am I stressed, am I in pain, and it combines it with external stimuli from the world.
So it's filtering the noise.
It is determining what is biologically relevant right now. Imagine you are deeply focused on writing an email. Your FPN and Coelacanth are locked in, you're in the zone, but then your blood sugar drops, your stomach growls. The insula picks that up.
And the salience network says, hey, wait a minute.
The salience network weighs that internal hunger signal against the external goal of the email. If the hunger is strong enough, if it is salient, it sends a signal to the FPN to switch tasks.
It toggles the switch.
It breaks the lock. It says, stop writing, we need to find food. It acts as the switchboard between the internal self-focused DMN and the external task-focused FPN.
It's the alarm system. And Seeley mentions that when this system fails, things go really wrong.
Yes. In a 2023 paper on the role of the salience network in cognitive deficits, it's noted that disorders like schizophrenia involve aberrant salience.
Aberrant salience. That sounds terrifying.
It is. The brain starts assigning importance to things that aren't important, the hum of the refrigerator or a random license plate number, a fleeting thought. The salience network lights up and says, this is critical.
So you start connecting dots that shouldn't be connected.
That can lead to delusions. You build entire narratives around irrelevant details because your brain is screaming at you that they matter.
Or the opposite could happen, right?
Yes, in apathy or severe depression. Nothing feels salient. Your stomach growls, who cares? The house is on fire, who cares? Nothing registers as worth doing. The salience detector is broken.
That concept of worth doing leads us to another fascinating paper in our stack, The Expected Value of Control by Shenhav and colleagues. This is an economic theory of the brain. I found this one really validating because it explains why I'm lazy.
It is one of the most compelling theories of the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, the DACC, which is a key hub of the salience network. Shenhav proposes that the DACC is an optimizer. It treats mental effort as a cost.
Thinking is expensive, like literally in terms of glucose.
Metabolically, yes, but also computationally. It requires focus, which means you can't do other things. It's an opportunity cost. So the DACC is constantly running a cost-benefit analysis. It asks, is the payoff for this task worth the effort it will take to achieve it?
So if I'm trying to solve a really hard puzzle and I'm getting nowhere, getting frustrated,
your DICC calculates that the expected value of control, or EVC, is low. The cost effort is high, and the expected reward is zero. So it signals the DLPFC to disengage. You quit. You feel that sensation of, ugh, I can't do this anymore.
That's not just me being weak-willed.
That is a financial decision by your brain.
But if someone offers me $1,000 to solve it,
The value in the equation shoots up. The DACC sees a high EVC and signals the DLPFC to power up, increase the gain, focus harder, allocate more resources. Suddenly, the effort feels justified.
it's the accountant of the mind. Is the juice worth the squeeze?
Precisely. And this explains why task switching is so hard. When you're interrupted, you have to pay a startup cost to get the FPN going again. The DACC hates that cost. It's why we get irritable when someone breaks our flow. We are literally calculating the wasted energy.
Now, we can't talk about the why without talking about the default mode network, the DMN. For a long time, this was just the do-nothing network, the screensaver of the brain.
Which was a massive misnomer. We are looking at Buckner's foundational work, but also some very exciting updates from Shafti and Menon in the last couple of years.
The paradox of the DMN is that it turns on when we stop focusing on the outside world. When I close my eyes and zone out, my task-positive networks go quiet and the DMN lights up like a Christmas tree.
Right. But it is not idle. It is involved in self-projection, thinking about your own past and future. It's involved in episodic memory and theory of mind thinking about what others are thinking. But the Shafti paper adds a crucial piece: creativity.
Creativity. So zoning out makes me creative.
Yes. They found that the DMN is causally linked to generating original ideas. When you are brainstorming or daydreaming or letting your mind wander in the shower, the DMN is highly active. It is shuffling through your internal database, making loose, novel associations that the rigid, rule-following FPN might screen out.
So the FPN is the editor. It's strict, it follows rules, it makes sure everything makes sense, but the DMN is the writer. It's wild, it throws paint at the wall to see what sticks.
That is a beautiful way to put it, and you need both. If you are all DMN, you are just dreaming, unconstrained by reality. If you are all FPN, you are a robot following rules with no new ideas. True innovation happens when they interact.
The DMN generates the wild idea, and the FPN evaluates it and figures out how to implement it.
Exactly. This transitions us perfectly to the side of the PFC that often gets ignored in the CEO metaphor, the social and emotional side, the hot PFC.
Because we aren't just logic machines. We have feelings. We have friends. We have a paper here by Rolls and colleagues on the orbitofrontal cortex and VMPFC connectome.
Edmund Rolls has done extensive work mapping the reward systems. This paper distinguishes between different parts of the anterior cingulate based on what they respond to.
It's not just one emotion button.
No. Rolls identifies that the pregenual ACC, the part in front of the knee of the corpus callosum, is activated specifically by rewards, good things. Finding food, seeing a smile, winning money.
And the bad stuff.
That's the supracallosal ACC, the part above the corpus callosum. It is activated by non-rewards and punishers. Bad outcomes. Losing money, pain, social rejection, the feeling of, that didn't work.
So we have a physical map of good versus bad processing right next to each other.
And the medial orbitofrontal cortex connects the, what I see, the sensory input to the, is it good, the reward value. It then routes that information to the parietal cortex to guide action. That is a donut, donuts are good, reach for donut.
But humans are more complex than just reach for donut. We also do things for other people. Sometimes we reach for the donut to give it to a friend. This brings us to a 2024 paper by Lockwood and colleagues regarding pro-social motivation. This study blew my mind.
This is a profound study. It gets to the heart of what we call altruism. Lockwood investigated patients with damage specifically to the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the VMPFC. They wanted to see how this damage affected their motivation.
And the distinction they found was incredible. Can you walk us through the experiment?
Sure. They used a dynamometer. It's a hand grip that measures force. They told the patients, if you squeeze this handle really hard, you will win money.
A simple effort for reward task.
Right. And the patients did it. The patients with VMPFC damage squeezed the handle just as hard as the healthy control group. Their self-motivation was perfectly intact. They understood the value of money. They had the energy. They did the work.
Okay, that's the baseline. But then they changed the rules.
Then they said, now, if you squeeze this handle really hard, someone else will win money. A stranger.
And what happened?
The healthy people squeezed. Maybe not quite as hard as for themselves, but they still put in significant effort, the VMPFC patients. Their effort collapsed. They just didn't squeeze.
Let's squeeze.
With minimal effort.
Wow. That is haunting.
It is. And it's important to clarify, these patients weren't evil. They weren't being mean or antisocial. When asked, they said they thought it was a nice thing to do for the other person. They just lacked the neural hardware to convert your benefit into my motivation.
So the VMPFC isn't just motivation in general. It's specifically the engine of caring about others enough to expend effort. It's the bridge between self and other.
Exactly. It suggests that prosociality, the willingness to exert effort for others, is a distinct neurobiological computation. The VMPFC is necessary to translate helping you into a value signal that the brain considers worth doing, that the DSEC will approve.
Without that circuit, altruism effectively disappears. That is somewhat terrifying, but also illuminating. Empathy has a zip code. It's a physical place in the brain.
It does, and that zip code runs on fuel. We need to briefly touch on the neurochemistry, referencing a recent review by Boyle on monoaminergic modulation.
The chemical cocktail. Because all these wires don't work without the juice.
The PFC relies on a very delicate balance of neurotransmitters. We know dopamine is crucial, specifically D1 receptors. Boyle explains that D1 receptors help with signal-to-noise. They help the PFC lock onto the important signal, the goal, and suppress the noise, the distraction.
Focus juice.
Essentially. But then you have norepinephrine, or ND. This follows what's called an inverted U shape.
The Goldilocks curve. Not too little, not too much.
Exactly. If you have too little norepinephrine, you are drowsy, unfocused, bored. But if you have too much, like when you're under high stress, you are frantic and disorganized. The D1 receptors get flooded, and the network disconnects.
The CEO walks out of the building.
This is why you can't think clearly when you're terrified. Your PFC is offline. You need the Goldilocks amount for optimal PFC function. And then there's serotonin.
What does that do?
Serotonin modulates flexibility and inhibition. Boyle discusses how the balance of excitation mediated by glutamate and inhibition mediated by GABA is tuned by these chemicals. If the EI balance tips, the network crashes. This is what we see in everything from schizophrenia to stress-induced burnout.
We have covered so much ground. But there is one final wrench to throw in the gears. We've been talking about the brain as if everyone's brain is the same, as if my PFC is a carbon copy of yours. But the recent data says, not so much. This is the precision revolution. And we are looking at a paper by Marek and Dosenbach from 2018. This is a massive wake-up call for neuroscience.
The problem with averages.
For years, fMRI studies would take 50 people, scan them once, and average their brains together to make a group map. This is where the FPN is. It turns out that smears the data. It blurs the details.
It's like averaging a map of London, New York, and Paris and trying to use it to navigate. You end up with a map of a city that doesn't exist.
Exactly. When Marek and Dosenbach started scanning one person many, many times, they call it the Midnight Scan Club because they'd scan one person for hours after the clinic closed, they found something startling.
What was it?
The topography of the frontoparietal network is highly variable between people.
So my FKM might be slightly to the left or shaped differently or connected differently than yours.
Significantly differently. The general neighborhood is the same, but the specific street address is unique to you. We might have the same networks, but the boundaries are unique. My attention spot might be where your daydreaming spot is. What does that mean for medicine?
It has huge clinical relevance. If you are trying to treat depression with TMS transcranial magnetic stimulation, where you're zapping a specific spot in the brain to fix the network.
You can't aim for the average.
If you aim at the average spot, you might miss the network entirely in that specific patient. You might be zapping the wrong circuit. The future is personalized brain maps.
It has to be. The precise wiring of your control networks is as unique as your fingerprint.
And they also mention oscillations. These networks don't just connect spatially, they synchronize temporally. They have to be in rhythm. The FPN coordinates with other networks using theta and alpha rhythms.
The 413 hertz range.
That is the language of long-range control. It's like they have to be on the same radio frequency to talk. If the FPN is broadcasting on FM 101.5 and the visual cortex is listening on AM 800, nothing happens.
Okay, let's try to synthesize all of this, because my memory stream is getting full. We started with the 4 streams. The cables carrying motor, emotional, memory, and sensory data. We move to the hierarchy, from concrete buttons to abstract rules.
Then the dual networks, the flexible FPN, and the stable con.
We explored the valuation systems, salience and EVC determining what's worth the effort. We saw the pro-social engine and the VMPFC. And finally, we learned that every single person's map is unique.
When you put it all together, the CEO metaphor really does fall apart. It is not a boss giving orders. It is a marketplace. It is a stock exchange.
A stock exchange. I like that. Unpack it.
Think about it. You have inputs coming in, sensory data, internal feelings from the insula, memories from the hippocampus. Those are the commodities. The salience network and DACC are the analysts assigning value to these inputs.
This hunger signal is trending up by food.
This puzzle is crashing, sell effort.
Right.
The FPN and Conan are the traders, executing the trades, moving resources, which is attention, to where the value is high.
And the VMPFC is the ethics committee, ensuring we invest in social bonds, not just personal profit.
And the DMN is the R&D department in the back room, dreaming up new startup ideas. It is a self-regulating, value-driven economy of information. There is no one person in charge. The decision emerges from the trading floor.
So what does this mean for the listener? Why should they care about their DACC or their FPN?
I think it changes how we view our own struggles. When you can't focus, it's not just a willpower failure. It's not a character flaw.
It's a calculation.
It might be that your DAC has calculated the EVC is too low. You need to increase the reward or decrease the friction. When you feel burnt out, it might be your norepinephrine levels tipping over the curve, disrupting that EI balance in your PFC.
It makes the abstract experience of being human feel a bit more manageable. It's machinery. Complex machinery, but machinery nonetheless.
And machinery can be understood and potentially fine-tuned.
I want to leave the listener with a thought based on that Lockwood paper about the VMPFC and the Shofty paper on the DMN.
Yep.
If the VMPFC drives our willingness to help others, and the DMN drives our ability to imagine alternatives and other people's perspectives.
You are wondering if morality is just a connectivity profile.
Exactly. If we could map an individual's pro-social connectome, using that precision mapping we talked about, could we predict how empathetic they are? Or, even wilder, could we tune it?
That's a huge question.
Could we use biofeedback or stimulation to strengthen the connection between the self network and the other network?
That is the ultimate question, isn't it? If morality is a function of network integration, then perhaps empathy is a skill that can be trained, not just a trait we are born with. It raises profound ethical questions, but the science suggests the circuitry is there.
Something to mull over the next time you decide to help a friend move a couch is that your VMPFC firing, or just a really high EVC calculation because they promised you pizza.
Probably a bit of both.
Thanks for diving deep with us. Pay attention to your networks today. See if you can feel the switch between your FPN and your DMN. It's a busy world in there.
Indeed it is.
Until next time.